Hello, I'm Richard Murphy, and I want to talk about something that happened in 1971 and which, as a result, has its 50th anniversary in 2021. And that is an action by President Richard Nixon of the USA. Now, he hasn't been well remembered by history because of the Watergate affair and the corruption that went with that. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm referring to is the fact that on the 15th of August 1971, Richard Nixon broke the link between the US dollar and gold. What he said was that there was no longer a fixed price at which a person could demand that their dollars be exchanged into gold. In the process, he ended what was called the gold standard. And because at that time we had a system of fixed exchange rates between countries. The pound was worth $2.40 and it was fixed at that rate at that point in time, and governments spent a lot of money to maintain those fixed rates between countries. The pound also had in effect a fixed exchange rate with gold until the 15th of August 1971. And then it didn't. The astonishing thing is that 50 years on, most economists, and I think a majority of people, haven't noticed that everything changed on that day. Most certainly people weren't aware of that at the time. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has recently put out a little note about the history of this occasion, and they recognise that at that point in time no one really appreciated what had happened. But what had happened was, well, frankly, seismic, because there was now nothing to back the value of any of the world's currencies except a government's own promise to pay. Now, that's pretty big, because once you could claim gold, and now you could claim nothing in exchange for the pound, dollar, or whatever else it might be in your pocket. Now, does that have implication? Well, yes, it does. First of all, it means that actually governments can create money at will. Previously, they were restricted by the amount of gold that there was in their vaults. We're all used to those pictures of gold in the vaults of the Bank of England and so on. And there's a pretty strong obsession with that gold holding. When Gordon Brown sold a significant part of the UK's gold holdings, late in the 20th century, it was treated as if this was some disaster for the UK economy, some sort of emptying out of the coffers, as if this was an event which was going to have serious repercussions. No, just meant that the UK owned less gold. It had no implication for the value of the pound as such at all, because the pound had no exchange rate to gold. But the government could then create as much money as it wished, unrelated to the amount of gold that it had, because people would accept its promise to pay. And indeed, that's exactly what has happened. The amount of money in the world has, of course, gone up dramatically since 1971. Now, part of that is down to inflation, although we haven't seen a great deal of that for a very long time. Part of it's due to growth. Clearly, there is more economic activity now than there was in 1971, in no small part due to the fact that there are literally billions of more people in the world now than there were then. So of course there is more economic activity, and they require more money to make the world go round. So in a very real sense, that extra money is really valuable because it actually has made possible the growth that the economy has wanted. But it's done something much more than that. It's let governments decide whether and how and when they want to run surpluses. That is, they want to literally take more out of the economy in tax than they spend into it by way of the spending that their parliaments authorise, or deficits when the process runs in reverse. The spending is bigger than the tax taken out. And they effectively, therefore, inject money into the economy for people to use. And that freedom to manage economies without that constraint of gold has meant that governments have been able to take control of the economy. And what they should, of course, have done is something that they didn't realise they could do in the 1970s, which is one reason why that was such a torrid decade for economic activity. We had so many crises. The fact that we had a petrol or oil crisis fueled by Arab states, partly, and let's be blunt about it, because they realised that actually gold and the dollar were not substitutes for each other anymore, so they could exploit the situation. But we also had other crises as well, and that was because governments didn't realise that they were free. In fact, Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan were the people who really understood that for the first time and introduced the measures that freed capital flows around the world a decade later, nearly in 1980. But even then, and even now, and I stress the two, even then and even now, there wasn't the understanding that governments really are in control of their own money supplies. We do not need to spend our time obsessing about, can we pay for this? Because where does the money come from? There is no shortage of money, because all that money now is a promise to pay. And the government's promise to pay is good because it can tax, and in a country where tax is paid, that means that the government can always command the real resources to back up its own spending plans, and as a consequence, money has value. Richard Nixon didn't realise what he was doing, but that was the point that he was making. Because the government can tax and can therefore command the resources in the real economy that it needs to fulfil its plans, its promise to pay is always good. And as a result, we have governments who can control their own macroeconomies. They are not enslaved to financial markets or gold or to anyone else. And that was a revolution which we're only just beginning to understand. We cannot wait another 50 years for the full implications to be seen. Now is the moment for governments around the world to understand this, to get on with it, and to spend as they need to meet the promises they must commit to make to their people, including those on climate change, which are critical to the future of the people of this world. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in what I've been saying in this video, please subscribe. There is a button below the viewing screen. If you're interested in what I have to say on Twitter, I'm at Richard J. Murphy on that medium. If you want to look at my blog, that's taxresearch.org.uk, and we have a Facebook page as well, Richard J. Murphy. So one of those things will get you more information on what this video series is about, and I hope I'll see you again soon.